The auction house reeked of desperation and old blood. Seraphine pressed closer to the stone pillar, clutching her worn shawl against the evening chill as bodies jostled around her. She hadn't meant to come here tonight. The Thornwood slave market was no place for a woman alone, especially not one with secrets buried so deep they could get her killed. But then she'd heard the whispers in the village square. They've captured one of the shadow wolves. A male. They're selling him at moonrise. Shadow wolves, the cursed shifters who roamed the Valdris Mountains, neither fully human nor fully beast. Monsters, the church called them. Abominations that needed to be purged from the realm. Seraphine had spent 23 years believing those stories. Now, staring at the creature chained to the auction platform, she wasn't sure what she believed anymore. He was magnificent, even bound in silver chains that sizzled against his skin, even with blood crusting his temple and bruises mottling his jaw. There was something untamed about him that made her breath catch. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the torchlight behind him. His hair was dark as midnight, falling in matted waves past his shoulders and his eyes. Seraphine's heart stuttered. His eyes were molten amber, burning with a fury that seemed to set the very air ablaze. They swept across the jeering crowd with cold contempt, dismissing merchant and nobleman alike. Until they found her, the world went silent. Those burning eyes locked onto hers, and Seraphine felt something crack open in her chest. Recognition. Impossible. Inexplicable recognition. As if some part of her soul had been waiting her entire life for this exact moment. We'll start the bidding at 50 gold pieces, the auctioneer bellowed, snapping Seraphine back to reality. Prime specimen, this one. Caught him 3 days ago in the mountain pass. Strong as 10 men, they say, perfect for the mines or the fighting pits. He'll tear out your throat the moment you unchain him, someone shouted from the crowd. Laughter rippled through the gathering. The auctioneer grinned, revealing rotted teeth. That's what the silver's for, isn't it? Burns the beast right out of them. It does. Keep him collared, and he's docile as a lamb. Seraphine watched the shadow wolf's jaw tighten at the word docile, a muscle feathered in his cheek. But he didn't react otherwise. Didn't give them the satisfaction. 40 gold pieces, the auctioneer amended when no bids came. Come now, gentlemen. When's the last time you had the chance to own a genuine wolf-blooded slave? When's the last time one didn't slaughter its master? A merchant called back. More laughter. 30 pieces then. Final offer before I send him to the crown's executioner. Seraphine's nails bit into her palms. She had 12 gold pieces to her name. 12 pieces she'd saved over 3 years of selling herbs and tinctures. 12 pieces meant to buy her passage on a ship far away from Thornwood and its magistrate who looked at her with too much suspicion in his eyes. The shadow wolf's gaze hadn't left her face. Help me, those amber eyes seemed to say. Or don't. But don't look away. 20 gold pieces, the auctioneer announced, desperation creeping into his voice. Surely someone. 12. The word left Seraphine's mouth before she could stop it. The crowd parted around her like wood around a stone, and suddenly she was standing in the open, every eye in the auction house fixed on her. What am I doing? Her mind screamed. What in the gods' names am I doing? 12 gold pieces, she repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. It's all I have. The auctioneer's face twisted with displeasure. The lady bids 12. Do I hear 13? 15? Anyone? Silence. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to own a shadow wolf, no matter how cheap. The risk was too great, the stigma too severe. 12 gold pieces, the auctioneer spat. Sold to the healer woman. A murmur ran through the crowd. Seraphine felt the weight of their stares, their judgment. The healer woman. The strange girl who lived alone at the edge of the Valdris forest. The one they whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear. Witch, their eyes said. Of course, the witch would buy the monster. Seraphine climbed the platform steps on trembling legs, pressing her small purse of coins into the auctioneer's greedy hands. Up close, the shadow wolf was even larger than she'd thought. The top of her head barely reached his collarbone, and she could see now that the silver chains had burned deep grooves into his wrists, the flesh around them raw and weeping. You're either very brave or very foolish, the auctioneer muttered, unlocking the chains with a heavy iron key. Don't come crying to me when he rips out your throat. The chains fell away with a clatter. The shadow wolf swayed on his feet, and Seraphine instinctively reached out to steady him. The moment her palm touched his arm, heat shot through her like lightning. She gasped. He went rigid. For one endless moment, they stood frozen together, her hand on his bare skin, his amber eyes boring into hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Then he spoke, his voice a low rasp that seemed to vibrate through her bones. Kaelira. Seraphine didn't understand the word, but something deep inside her, something ancient and primal, responded to it like a flower turning toward the sun. "Come with me," she whispered, not knowing if he understood her language any better than she understood his. "I'll take you somewhere safe." She tugged gently on his arm, and to her amazement he followed. The walk to Seraphine's cottage should have taken 20 minutes through the forest path. Instead, it stretched into an hour of slow, painful progress, as the shadow wolf's strength flagged with every step. "Almost there," she murmured as her cottage came into view through the trees. It was a small thing, barely more than 2 rooms with a thatched roof, and a garden of medicinal herbs growing wild around the door. But it was hers, the only thing she'd ever owned outright, and tonight it would have to shelter something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The shadow wolf stumbled on the threshold, catching himself against the doorframe with a grunt of pain. In the candlelight spilling from within, Seraphine could finally see the full extent of his injuries. It was worse than she'd thought. Beyond the burns from the silver chains, his torso was a map of brutality. Whip marks crisscrossed his back. A deep gash ran from his shoulder to his hip, crusted with dried blood but still seeping at the edges. And there, just above his heart, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A brand, still fresh, the flesh around it angry and inflamed. The crown's mark, the symbol they used to tag condemned prisoners. "They were going to execute you," she breathed. "Weren't they?" The auction was just to squeeze a few more coins before. He didn't understand her words, but he must have understood her tone. His amber eyes met hers, and slowly, deliberately, he nodded. Seraphine's hands shook as she guided him to the small pallet by the hearth. "Sit. I have medicines, herbs, I can help." She bustled around her cottage, gathering supplies, clean cloth, boiled water, her precious store of healing salves. "I don't know what I was thinking," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "I don't know why I bid on you. I needed that money. I was going to leave this place, start over somewhere no one knew me, somewhere. I wouldn't have to hide what I—" She cut herself off abruptly, glancing at him. He was watching her with those unsettling amber eyes, his head tilted slightly to one side. "Never mind," she said. "You don't understand me anyway." She knelt beside him and began cleaning the wound on his chest, trying to ignore the way her pulse raced whenever her fingers brushed his skin. Up close, she could smell him pine and wood smoke, and something wilder underneath, something that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. "This will sting," she warned, dabbing at the gash with a cloth soaked in herb-infused water. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. Just watched her work with that intense, unwavering gaze. "You're very calm for someone who was just sold like cattle," Seraphine observed quietly. "Are you in shock? Is that why you're not trying to escape?" The shadow wolf's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. He spoke again in his musical language, the words flowing like water over stones. She moved to examine the burn marks on his wrists, and her stomach turned at what she found. The silver had eaten almost to the bone in places. How he was still conscious, she couldn't fathom. "How long did they keep you chained?" she whispered. He didn't answer, couldn't answer, but his free hand came up slowly, carefully, and his fingers grazed her cheek with devastating gentleness. Seraphine froze. The touch sent sparks cascading down her spine. Her breath caught. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. The shadow wolf spoke again, that same word from before Kaelira. "What does that mean?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why do you keep calling me that?" His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. Featherlight. His amber eyes had softened. The fury in them banked to something warmer, something that made Seraphine's chest ache with longing she didn't understand. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed onto the pallet, unconscious. No, no, no. Seraphine pressed her ear to his chest, relief flooding through her at the steady thump of his heartbeat. "Don't you dare die on me. Not after I spent my entire future buying you." She worked through the night, cleaning wounds, applying poultices, forced sips of healing tea between his slack lips whenever he stirred. By the time dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, she had done everything within her mortal power to save him. It wasn't enough. The fever had set in just after midnight. Now his skin burned like a furnace beneath her hands, and his breathing had grown shallow, rattling. "Please," Seraphine whispered, pressing a cool cloth to his brow. "Please don't die." But even as she said the words, she knew the truth. He was slipping away, and there was only one thing left that might save him, the thing she had sworn never to use again. The gift had always lived inside her like a second heartbeat. For as long as Seraphine could remember, she'd been able to feel it, a warm, pulsing energy coiled at the center of her being, waiting to be released. Her mother had called it the blessing, Her grandmother had called it the curse. Never let them see, her grandmother had whispered on her deathbed, gripping Seraphine's hands with surprising strength. Never let them know what you can do. They burned your mother for it. They'll burn you too if they find out. Seraphine had been 7 years old. She'd watched from the shadows, as the village dragged her mother to the pyre, as the flames consumed the woman who had sung her lullabies and kissed her scraped knees and healed her childhood fevers with nothing but a gentle touch and a whispered prayer. Witch, they had called her. Demon touched. For 16 years, Seraphine had kept her gift buried. She used herbs and poultices and prayers that did nothing, because that was what normal healers did. She watched people die of injuries she could have healed in moments, and she told herself it was necessary, that her life mattered too. Now she knelt beside a dying shadow wolf, her hands hovering over his burning skin, and knew that she was about to break every promise she'd ever made to herself. "I can't let you die," she whispered. "I don't know why, but I can't." She closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, to that warm, waiting place she'd kept locked away for so long. The gift answered like an old friend. Light bloomed between her palms, soft, golden, and utterly inhuman. It cast dancing shadows across the cottage walls as Seraphine pressed her glowing hands to the shadow wolf's chest. The effect was immediate. She gasped as her energy poured into him, meeting something unexpected. Not emptiness, not the passive void of a dying man, but power vast and wild and ancient rising up to meet her own. This was two rivers colliding, two storms merging into one. His power and hers tangled together, twisting and dancing and weaving into something entirely new. Through the connection, she felt him, not just his injuries, the cracked ribs, the infected wounds, the poison of silver working through his blood, but his essence, his fury and his grief and his desperate, aching loneliness. Centuries of it, centuries of running, of hiding, of watching his kind hunted to the edge of extinction. Alpha, something whispered in her mind, a word that wasn't a word, a knowing that came from somewhere outside herself. He is an alpha, one of the last, and beneath that knowledge, something else, something that terrified her. Mine, his power seemed to growl as it wrapped around hers. You are mine. Seraphine tried to pull back, suddenly afraid, but the connection held her fast, and she watched helplessly as his wounds began to knit themselves closed, as the fever receded like morning mist, as color returned to his ashen cheeks. Then, without warning, his eyes snapped open. Not amber this time, gold. Pure, molten gold burning with supernatural fire. Before Seraphine could react, his hand shot up and gripped the back of her neck. She cried out in surprise, but he was already pulling her down, until her throat was inches from his mouth. "Wait," she gasped. "What are you?" His teeth sank into the curve of her shoulder. Pain exploded through her, sharp and shocking. She tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat as the pain transformed into something else entirely. Heat, pleasure. A bone-deep rightness that made her toes curl and her vision blur. She felt him drinking her, not her blood, but her essence, her power, her very soul. Felt him marking her with something permanent, something that would never wash away. Mate, his consciousness growled through their connection. My mate, finally found, finally mine. Then his jaw went slack, and he released her, falling back onto the pallet in unconscious exhaustion. Seraphine knelt above him, trembling from head to toe. Blood trickled down her shoulder where his teeth had broken skin. Her gift had sputtered out like a snuffed candle, leaving her drained and dizzy. But that wasn't what terrified her. What terrified her was the warmth spreading from the bite, the strange, tingling energy that was even now working its way through her veins, changing something fundamental in her blood. "What did you do to me?" She whispered to his unconscious form. "What did you do?" Her hands flew to her shoulder. The wound was already closing, the skin knitting together with impossible speed. But the heat remained, burrowing deeper, reaching toward her heart. Seraphine's vision swam, the room tilted, and as darkness claimed her, she could have sworn she heard wolves howling in the distance, dozens of them, hundreds, their voices raised in something that sounded terrifyingly like celebration. 3 days, for 3 days, Seraphine drifted in and out of consciousness, caught in a fever dream that felt more real than waking. She saw forests she'd never visited, mountains she'd never climbed, and faces she'd never known. And through it all, a presence moved beside her, warm and protective, and constant, guarding her through the strange, shifting darkness. When she finally woke, truly woke, the shadow wolf was gone. Seraphine sat up slowly, her head pounding. Her cottage looked exactly as she'd left it. Herbs drying in the rafters. Fire burned down to embers, morning light filtering through the small window. But the pallet by the hearth was empty, the blankets neatly folded. "No," she breathed, scrambling to her feet. "No, he can't be." Her hand flew to her shoulder, finding smooth skin where the bite had been. No wound, no scar, nothing but a faint warmth that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Did I dream it all? But she knew she hadn't, could feel the truth of it in her bones, in the strange new energy humming beneath her skin. Something had changed in her, something fundamental and irreversible. A folded piece of leather on her small table caught her eye. She crossed to it on unsteady legs, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. Inside was a pendant, a wolf carved from black stone, so detailed she could see individual strands of fur, and wrapped around it, a scrap of parchment with words written in an elegant, unfamiliar script. She couldn't read them, but somehow, holding the pendant in her palm, she understood. "I will return for you. Wait for me. Wait for you," Seraphine whispered, her eyes burning with tears she didn't understand. "I don't even know your name. I don't know what you did to me, or why I feel like half of her soul had just walked out the door." The weeks that followed tested Seraphine in ways she'd never imagined. On the surface, nothing had changed. She still gathered herbs at dawn, still treated the villagers who came to her door with coughs and fevers and broken bones, using only mortal medicine now, more careful than ever after her reckless exposure, still endured the suspicious glances and whispered accusations that followed her everywhere she went. But beneath the surface, everything was different. The dreams came every night now, vivid, consuming dreams of running through moonlit forests on 4 legs instead of 2, dreams of a man with amber eyes who held her in the darkness and called her Kalir and whispered promises in a language she was beginning, impossibly, to understand. "My heart," he called her, "my soul, my other half. I'm coming," he promised, "soon." And her body was changing in ways that frightened her. Her senses had sharpened to a degree that bordered on supernatural. She could hear conversations happening 3 houses away, could smell a storm coming hours before the first clouds appeared, could see in the darkness as clearly as she saw in daylight. The warmth in her shoulder had spread, reaching tendrils into every corner of her being. Some days it felt like a gentle embrace, other days it felt like a fire trying to consume her from within. "What's happening to me?" she asked her reflection in the basin one morning, staring at eyes that seemed to flash gold in certain lights. "What am I becoming?" The reflection offered no answers. 6 weeks after the Shadow Wolf's departure, Magistrate Vorn came to her door. Seraphine knew something was wrong the moment she saw his face. Vorn was a cruel man. She'd seen the pleasure he took in public punishments, but he'd always regarded her with wary distance, unwilling to move against the village's only healer without proof. Today, that distance was gone. "Seraphine of Thornwood," he announced, flanked by 4 armed guards. "You are hereby summoned to the Crown's court to answer questions regarding your unusual talents." Seraphine's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about, don't you?" Vorn's smile was cold. "We've received reports that you purchased a wolf-blooded prisoner 6 weeks past. That prisoner has been identified as Corvinus Ashbourne, Alpha of the Shadow Mountain Pack and enemy of the Crown." Corvinus. Finally, she had a name for the man in her dreams. "I know nothing about shadow wolves or alphas," she lied. "The prisoner died of his wounds the night I brought him home. I buried him in the forest. Then you won't mind if we search your property." They found the pendant within minutes. The black wolf carving that Seraphine had been foolish enough to keep, to wear against her skin because it made the aching loneliness more bearable. Vorn held it up triumphantly. "The mark of the Shadow Mountain Pack. You're either a conspirator or a fool. Either way, you're coming with us." As they forced her into the iron cart, Seraphine closed her eyes and reached for that warm presence in the back of her mind. "Corvinus," she thought desperately. "They've found me. They're taking me away, miles away, in the heart of the Valdris Mountains." A wolf with amber eyes lifted his head and howled. The Crown's court was not a place of justice. Seraphine understood this the moment the iron cart rattled through its gates. The fortress loomed against the gray sky like a crouching beast, its black stone walls stained with centuries of suffering. Gargoyles leered from every parapet, their stone eyes seeming to track her as the guard hauled her from the cart and dragged her through a maze of torchlit corridors. They threw her into a cell that smelled of mold and old fear. The door clanged shut with terrible finality. "Someone will come for you soon," a guard sneered through the bars. "The Inquisitor has questions about your wolf-loving ways." Then she was alone. Seraphine pressed her back against the damp stone wall and tried to control her breathing. The pendant was gone, confiscated along with everything else she'd carried, but the warmth in her shoulder remained, pulsing steadily beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Corvinus, she thought, reaching for that gossamer thread of connection. Can you hear me? Do you even know I'm here? No answer came. Perhaps there never would. Hours passed. Or maybe days. It was impossible to tell in the windowless dark. Seraphine dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every distant scream, every clang of metal on metal. The Crown's court was full of prisoners, she realized. Full of people who would never see sunlight again. Is this how my mother felt? She wondered, waiting in the dark for them to come and burn her. When the cell door finally opened, Seraphine was almost relieved. Anything was better than the waiting. 2 guards seized her arms and marched her through more corridors, up winding stairs, until they reached a circular chamber that made her skin crawl. Alchemical equipment lined the walls, glass vessels filled with bubbling liquids, jars containing things she didn't want to identify, charts covered in symbols that hurt to look at. At the center of it all stood a man in black robes, his face pale as parchment, his eyes the color of dirty ice. Seraphine of Thornwood, he said, his voice soft and terrible. I am High Inquisitor Malachar. I've been so looking forward to meeting you. Seraphine said nothing. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Never let them see. Never let them know. You purchased a wolf-blooded prisoner 6 weeks ago. Malachar continued, circling her slowly. A prisoner who has since been identified as one of the most dangerous creatures in the realm. Where is he now? Dead? Seraphine said. I told Magistrate Vorn. He died of his wounds. Did he? Malachar's smile didn't reach his eyes. How curious. Because my sources tell me that Corvinus Ashbourne was spotted 3 days ago, very much alive, leading a raid on one of our silver mining operations. Seraphine's heart leaped despite her fear. He's alive. He's fighting back. I don't know anything about that, no? Malachar stopped in front of her, tilting his head like a bird examining a worm. Then perhaps you can explain this. He held up a vial filled with dark liquid. We found traces of something interesting in your cottage, residue from a healing unlike anything our alchemists have seen before. Light-based, powerful. His pale eyes glittered. Forbidden. Seraphine's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Malachar set the vial aside and picked up something else, a silver instrument with a needle-sharp point. I think you're far more than a simple herb woman. And I think, with the proper encouragement, you're going to tell me everything. The first touch of silver against her skin made Seraphine scream. She didn't know how long the torture lasted. Malachar was skilled at his craft. He knew exactly how much pain a body could endure without breaking, exactly where to cut to cause maximum agony without risking death. And through it all, he kept asking the same question. Where is Corvinus Ashbourne? How did you heal him? What are you? Seraphine told him nothing, not because she was brave. She had never felt less brave in her life, but because she genuinely didn't have the answers he wanted. She didn't know where Corvinus was. Didn't understand her own gift well enough to explain it. Didn't know what she was becoming. But as the hours bled together and consciousness became a flickering, fragile thing, she began to feel something else. Rage, not her own rage. She was too broken for that. This fury came from somewhere outside herself, pouring through the bond like molten iron. It filled her veins with fire, pushed back the darkness threatening to swallow her whole. Hold on, a voice growled in her mind. Not words exactly, but meaning. Emotion. Promise. Hold on. I'm coming, Corvinus. Hold on. Seraphine clung to that fury like a lifeline. Let it burn away the pain, the fear, the despair. Somewhere out there, he was coming for her. She just had to survive long enough for him to arrive. Fascinating, Malachar murmured, studying her face with clinical interest. Your pain tolerance has increased significantly in the last hour, almost as if something is sustaining you. He leaned closer, and his nostrils flared. There's something different about your scent, he said slowly. Something I've encountered before, in the wolf-blooded we've captured. His pale eyes widened. He marked you. The Alpha marked you as his mate. Seraphine said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Malachar's laugh was a cold, terrible thing. Oh, this is better than I ever imagined. Do you know what happens to a wolf who loses his marked mate, Healer? The bond drives them mad. They become feral, uncontrollable. He straightened, his robes rustling. We don't need to hunt Corvinus Ashbourne anymore. We just need to keep you here, suffering, and he'll come to us. He turned to the guards. Take her to the tower, and send word to all our outposts. The Alpha will be coming. Make sure we're ready for him. As the guards dragged her from the chamber, Seraphine felt Corvinus's rage spike through their bond, so intense it nearly drove her to her knees. Don't, she tried to send back. It's a trap. "Don't come," but she knew with bone-deep certainty that he would come anyway. The tower cell was marginally better than the dungeon. There was a window, at least a narrow slit in the stone that let in pale moonlight and cold mountain air. Seraphine pressed her face to it, breathing deep, trying to steady herself. Below, the fortress sprawled across the mountainside like a dark cancer. Beyond its walls, she could see the Vadras range stretching toward the horizon, peak after snow-capped peak, disappearing into the darkness. He's out there somewhere, she thought, coming for me even though it might kill him. A week passed. Then, too, Seraphine's wounds healed with unnatural speed, another gift from the bond, she suspected. But Malachar kept finding new ways to hurt her, always careful not to cause permanent damage. She was bait, after all. Bait needed to stay alive. The dreams came every night now, more vivid than ever. In them, she ran through moonlit forests beside a massive black wolf with amber eyes. They hunted together, played together, curled around each other in hidden dens while snow fell silent outside. And when the wolf shifted into a man tall and scarred and beautiful, he held her like she was the most precious thing in existence. Soon, he promised in those dreams. "Hold on, Kalira. I'm almost there. They're expecting you," she warned. "They have silver weapons, hundreds of soldiers." "I know." His dream self pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt his determination like a physical force. "I don't care. You're mine. I will burn this entire kingdom to ash before I let them keep you." Seraphine woke from those dreams with tears on her cheeks and an ache in her chest that nothing could ease. On the 15th night, everything changed. Seraphine was dozing fitfully when a sound jolted her awake, howling. Not one wolf, but dozens, their voices rising in a chorus that made her blood sing. She scrambled to the window, pressing her face against the cold stone. Below, chaos had erupted. Wolves poured from the tree line like a silver flood, their eyes gleaming gold in the moonlight. They crashed against the fortress walls like waves against rock, and where they met the guards, blood sprayed black in the darkness. But it wasn't the wolves that stole Seraphine's breath. It was the creature leading them. He was enormous, twice the size of the others, with fur as black as midnight, and eyes that burned like twin suns. Power rolled off him in waves she could feel even from this distance. And when he threw back his head and howled, the very stones seemed to tremble. Corvinus, as if hearing his name in her thoughts, the great wolf's head snapped up. Those blazing eyes found her window, found her face, and even across the distance, she felt the bond between them surge with recognition. "Mine," his consciousness roared into hers. "I'm coming." He launched himself at the fortress wall, claws finding purchase in the ancient stone. The guards tried to stop him, silver-tipped arrows, blessed blades, alchemical fire, but nothing slowed him down. He climbed like a shadow, like a nightmare, leaving a trail of broken bodies in his wake. Seraphine backed away from the window, her heart hammering. The door to her cell exploded inward. A man stood in the ruined doorway, naked and blood-streaked, his chest heaving with exertion. He was everything her dreams had promised, and more, tall enough to fill the frame, broad-shouldered, scarred. His dark hair was wild around his face, and his eyes were still blazing gold, fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Corvinus," she breathed. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and swept her into his arms. She gasped at the contact. His skin was burning hot against hers, his grip almost painfully tight. But she couldn't pull away. Every cell in her body was screaming yes, and finally in home. He buried his face in her hair and spoke against her temple, his voice a ragged growl. "I thought I lost you. When I felt your pain through the bond," he shuddered. "I have never known fear like that. Not in 400 years of life." 400. Seraphine pulled back to stare at him. "You're 400 years old?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Wolf-blooded aged slowly. The smile faded. "We need to go. More soldiers are coming." He shifted his grip, lifting her easily into his arms, and strode toward the window. "Wait," Seraphine gasped. "We're in a tower. You can't just..." But he was already stepping onto the ledge, and then they were falling. Seraphine screamed, clutching his neck, but the impact never came. Corvinus landed in a crouch that absorbed the shock completely, his supernatural strength, turning what should have been death into nothing more than a gentle jolt. Wolves surrounded them immediately, forming a protective circle. Up close, Seraphine could see their eyes were intelligent, aware these weren't animals. These were people in wolf form. "My pack," Corvinus said, answering her unspoken question. "What remains of it?" "They came when I called." He set her on her feet, but kept one arm wrapped firmly around her waist, as if he couldn't bear to stop touching her. She didn't mind. She wasn't sure she could stand on her own anyway. "The Inquisitor," she managed. "Malachar, He knows about the bond. He was using me to trap you. Corvinus's expression hardened. Then we'll have to make sure he can't use you again. He spoke to a silver wolf in that musical language, then turned back to her. You're trembling, he said quietly. Are you afraid of me? Seraphine considered the question. She was standing in the ruins of a battle surrounded by wolves and held in the arms of a creature she'd been taught was a monster. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something else entirely. No, she whispered. I'm afraid of how much I'm not afraid. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, then wonder, then a fierce, blazing joy. Kailira, he breathed, and this time she understood the word perfectly. Beloved, chosen, mine. He kissed her forehead with devastating tenderness, then swept her into his arms again. We need to go, he said. I'm taking you home. Home, Seraphine discovered, was a hidden fortress carved into the heart of Shadow Mountain. They traveled for 3 days through wild territory forests so old the trees seemed to touch the sky, rivers that ran cold and clean from glacial peaks. Corvinus carried her much of the way, his supernatural stamina inexhaustible. The Crown decided 50 years ago that our kind was too dangerous to exist, he told her one night. We were thousands once, now barely 200 remain. I watched my father die trying to negotiate peace. My mother threw herself from a cliff rather than be captured. Seraphine reached for his hand, feeling his decades-old pain through the bond. You saved my life, he said quietly. You kept my existence secret even when they tortured you. You are extraordinary, Seraphine. I'm not. You are everything. A true mate, blessed by the old gods. In 400 years I've met only 3 true mated pairs. When one died, the other followed within days. Is that what we have? Yes. My wolf recognized you the moment I saw you. Then why do you keep pulling away? He went very still. Because of what I did. The bite. I forced the bond without your consent. The fever had taken my mind, and his jaw tightened. I violated you, Seraphine. Understanding crashed over her. You're pulling away because you think I don't want you. She dropped to her knees before him, taking his face in her hands. You didn't force anything. You were dying, delirious, and I chose to save you. She took a breath. I don't regret any of it, except perhaps not kissing you sooner. Corvinus made a sound half groan, half growl, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss started gentle, but when she fisted her hands in his hair, something broke loose inside him. He kissed her like a drowning man gasping for air, like she was sunlight, and he'd been trapped in darkness for 400 years. Mine, his consciousness sang. Finally mine. Yours, she sent back. Always. When they pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. The claiming bite changed you. Your body is trying to become wolf-blooded, but the transformation is incomplete. Without intervention, you'll die within months. What kind of intervention? A completion ritual. It's dangerous. Many don't survive. And if it fails, his voice cracked. When one true mate dies, the other follows. The fortress rose from the cliffs like something born of stone itself. As they arrived, a young woman ran toward them. Corvinus, brother? Corvinus stiffened. Impossible, she died in the purge, but Talia was throwing herself into his arms. The Inquisitors kept me 30 years for experiments, but I escaped. When Talia noticed Seraphine, her expression shifted. You brought a human here? She's my mate, Corvinus said quietly. A human. Your true mate is a human. Talia's voice rose. They're all the same. She stormed toward the fortress. Seraphine caught Corvinus's arm. Let her go. She needs time. But watching Talia's retreating form, she saw something beyond grief, something calculating, something cold, too weak. Past at the fortress, she learned to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of Shadow Mountain, to recognize faces and names among the pack. Most of the wolf-blooded treated her with cautious warmth, curious about the human who had captured their alpha's heart, willing to reserve judgment until she proved herself. Talia was the exception. Corvinus's sister watched Seraphine with cold, calculating eyes whenever they crossed paths. She never spoke directly to her, never acknowledged her existence, beyond the occasional contemptuous glance. And the transformation episodes were getting worse. Seraphine could feel it, something inside her trying to break free, and something else trying to hold it back. Her body was at war with itself, human and wolf fighting for dominance. The elders have finished preparing the ritual site, Corvinus told her one evening, finding her alone on one of the fortress's high balconies. We can attempt the completion ceremony tomorrow night, during the blood moon. Seraphine's heart stuttered. Tomorrow? The blood moon amplifies the wolf spirit. It's our best chance for a successful transformation. He took her hands in his. But Seraphine, I need you to understand the risks. Truly understand them. You've told me. Many don't survive. It's more than that. His jaw tightened. The ritual requires you to die. Completely. Your human heart must stop. Your human breath must cease. Only then can the wolf spirit fully claim your body and bring you back as one of us. She stared at him. You didn't mention the dying part before. Because I was hoping the elders would find another way. His voice cracked. They haven't. This is the only path forward: death and rebirth. Or slow deterioration until the incomplete bond tears you apart from within. What happens if the rebirth doesn't work? Corvinus's hands tightened on hers. Then I follow you. The true mate bond, when one dies, the other cannot survive. If you don't wake up tomorrow night, I won't wake up either. The weight of his words crashed over her. Not just her life, his too. And if he died, the pack lost their alpha. Tears spilled down her cheeks. That's not fair. No, he agreed softly. Love rarely is. He kissed her slow, deep, achingly tender. Tomorrow night, she said, we do the ritual. The ritual chamber was carved deep into the mountain's heart. A vast cavern, lit by phosphorescent crystals that cast everything in pale blue light. Ancient symbols covered every surface, carved into the stone floor, painted on the walls, etched into the ceiling high above. Seraphine stood at the center wearing a simple white shift. Her feet were bare against the cold stone, her hair unbound. Around her, the entire pack had gathered, hundreds of golden eyes watching from the shadows. Corvinus stood before her, stripped to the waist. In his hands, he held a ceremonial dagger, the blade black as night, carved from volcanic glass. Are you ready? His voice was rough with emotion. Seraphine looked into his amber eyes, those eyes that had found her across a crowded auction house that had blazed with fury and softened with love. She thought of everything they'd been through: the auction, the healing, the bite, the torture, the rescue, the kiss. Such a short time to fall so completely in love, and yet she couldn't imagine any other outcome. I'm ready, she said. I love you, Corvinus whispered. Whatever happens next, know that. I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I will love you until the stars burn out. I know. Seraphine placed her hand over his, on the dagger's hilt. I love you too. Together, they raised the blade. Together, they plunged it into her heart. Pain, not like anything she'd experienced before, not the torture, not the transformation episodes, not even the claiming bite. This was absolute, all-consuming, final. The blade was cold in her chest, and she could feel her heart stuttering around it, trying desperately to keep beating. Seraphine's legs gave out. Corvinus caught her, lowering her gently to the stone floor. Through dimming vision, she saw his face above hers, tears streaming down his cheeks, his lips moving in what might have been prayers. Hold on, he was saying. Hold on, Cavaliera, come back to me. Please come back to me. But the darkness was pulling at her, dragging her down into depths she'd never imagined. Her heartbeat slowed, her breath rattled. And then, nothing. Seraphine floated in darkness. She wasn't afraid. Wasn't anything, really. Just existing. Suspended in a void that felt neither warm nor cold. Is this death, she wondered. Is this all there is? A sound reached her through the emptiness. Faint at first, then growing stronger. Howling, hundreds of wolves raising their voices in a chorus that seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. And beneath the howling, a single voice calling her name. Seraphine, come back. Please. I can't do this without you. Corvinus, her mate. Her heart. She tried to answer, but she had no voice. Tried to reach for him, but she had no hands. The darkness held her fast, and she felt herself beginning to dissolve into it, becoming one with the void. No, the word erupted from somewhere deep inside her. Not her human mind, but something older, something that had been waiting her entire life for this exact moment. No. I will not die, not now, not when I finally found him. Power surged through her, wild and primal and utterly inhuman. She felt her body respond even through the darkness, felt bones shifting and muscles reforming. The pain returned, but this time it was different. This time it felt like birth rather than death. Mine. The wolf spirit howled inside her. This life is mine. This mate is mine. I will not surrender either. Light exploded through the darkness. Seraphine opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Corvinus's face, pale with terror, streaked with tears, beautiful beyond description. He was clutching her to his chest, his body shaking with sobs. Corvinus, she tried to say, but what emerged was a sound she'd never made before. A low, rumbling growl that vibrated through her transformed vocal cords. His eyes flew open. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then his face crumpled with relief so profound it looked like agony. "You're alive," he choked at. "Oh gods, you're alive." Seraphine sat up easily, startled by how her body obeyed. She felt different, stronger, more alive than she'd ever been, and when she looked down at her hands, she gasped. Her skin shimmered faintly in the crystal light. Her nails had lengthened into something not quite claws, but not quite human either, and when she touched her face, she felt subtle changes, sharper cheekbones, more defined features. "What do I look like?" she breathed. "Beautiful." Corvinus's voice was rough with emotion. "You look like you were always meant to look, like the goddess herself carved you from moonlight." Around them, the pack had gone silent. Seraphine became aware of hundreds of eyes watching her, not with suspicion now, but with awe. "She survived," someone whispered, "the first human in centuries. Blessed by the old gods. Our Alpha's true mate." Corvinus helped her to her feet, keeping one arm wrapped firmly around her waist. She leaned into him gratefully, still adjusting to her new body, her new senses. Everything was sharper now. The smell of pine and stone and pack, the sound of heartbeat echoing off the cavern walls, the taste of magic lingering on her tongue. "How do you feel?" Corvinus murmured against her temple. Seraphine considered the question. Her heart was beating steadily, her chest a heart that had stopped and started again. Her lungs filled easily with air. And deep inside her, where fear and uncertainty had lived for so long, she felt only peace. "I feel like myself," she said slowly. "But more, like I've finally become who I was always supposed to be." Corvinus's arms tightened around her. "You're wolf-blooded now. One of us. You'll live as long as I do, heal as fast as I do." His voice dropped to a whisper. "We have centuries ahead of us, Kaelira. Centuries together." The enormity of it washed over her, not just survival, but a whole new existence. A mate, a pack, a home, a future. The celebration lasted until dawn. Later, in Corvinus's chambers, Seraphine stood at the window watching the stars fade. "I was thinking about my mother," she admitted. "She died because of what she was. And now I'm something even more forbidden." Corvinus pulled her into his arms. "You're not forbidden here. You're celebrated. Treasured." He tilted her chin up. "And I will never let anyone hurt you again. Bold promise. I'm an alpha." His lips curved into a smile. "Bold promises are what we do." She laughed, actually laughed, a sound she hadn't made in weeks, and his smile widened into something breathtaking. He kissed her then, and this time there was no desperation in it. No fear, no urgency, no shadow of impending death, just warmth and love and the sweet promise of forever. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we live. We lead the pack together. We rebuild what was lost. We fight for our people's survival." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "And we do it together, for as long as the stars shine." Seraphine closed her eyes and let herself believe it. Let herself feel the bond between them, golden and unbreakable. Let herself trust that she had finally found where she belonged. Not the village that feared her, not the crown that hunted her, but here, in the arms of an alpha king surrounded by a pack that had claimed her as their own. She was wolf-blooded now. She was mated. She was home. And nothing, not time, not enemies, not even death itself would ever take that from her again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed Seraphine and Corvinus's story. If you want to hear more paranormal romance tales, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought. I read every single one. Until next time, stay wild.